What's up, and welcome to part 2 of the KA Turbo install. Today we're going to be tackling the oil system, the upgrades we're going to have to do there, which is modifying the oil pan so it has a turbo oil line return. I'm also going to be mounting the turbo itself, which is a bottom mount.
Drain the engine oil, because you're going to be removing the oil pan. The tools you will need are
a 10mm 1/4 inch socket, a couple extensions. I used an impact to be able to get off all 12 of the 10mm bolts that hold the pan to the block.
The 9 nuts and bolts that hold the transmission braces in place will need to be removed too.
Then you're also going to need a 14mm socket and driver. That's to loosen the engine mounts so you can lift up on the transmission and slide the pan out from underneath. You're also going to use the 14 to drop the sway bar on the front of the car so you can actually have the space to be able to wiggle the pan out from underneath too. And then also you're going to need a 12mm 1/4 inch socket and driver to be able to drop the oil sump at the bottom. And when you do that, it's actually the pickup, not the sump. When you drop the pickup itself, that's going to allow you the clearance to be able to actually slide the pan out from underneath. The process for attaching the bung to the oil pan is pretty simple. You're going to want to find a location on the pan that clears all the obstacles around the block so you have a clean path for the return line to come back to the oil pan from the turbo. Pretty simple. Just make sure that if your car has air conditioning, it's clear the compressor, clear the engine mounts, and also doesn't go into any of the spots to be able to reattach the oil pan. So you don't want the bung to be blocking any of the bolt holes that actually hold the oil pan to the engine block. So I marked the location, then used a punch to make a mark to set my drill bit into, then used a small drill bit to drill a pilot hole, then stepped it out with a unibit to get it out to the size that I needed, where it was the same size as the inner diameter of the bung. So now I've cleaned off the surface of the oil pan with a flappy sander disc on an angle grinder, and now it's time to tack weld the bung into place with my welder. So let's get that MIG fired up.
After I cleaned up my welds, I painted the bare metal with black spray paint. Moving on to the intercooler, you have to remove the stock air intake and the front bumper. Mock up the position of the intercooler. The top bracket for my intercooler used the same nut and bolt as the hood latch assembly. To get the intercooler as far back as possible, I trimmed back the inside of the frame rail ends for clearance on both sides. Then I secured the 3 12mm bolts, one on top and 2 on bottom, to hold the intercooler in place. Using this nice diagram I found, I marked the cut location in the stock battery tray for the top intercooler pipe. I highly recommend buying a hole saw bit slightly larger than the diameter of your intercooler pipe to save time and make the cut cleaner. I used a drill and a body saw to cut mine. After you're done cutting or drilling, be sure to paint and primer the cut edges to avoid rust. Since we cut into the battery tray, in part number 3, I will show you some of the options for battery relocation or replacement. Remove your exhaust header. Mount the turbo to the bottom mount manifold, and then install it where your headers used to be. Torque the exhaust nuts to spec and celebrate your progress. In part number 3, I'm going to finish up the intercooler piping, run the oil feed and return lines, install a new battery, bolt up a new downpipe, and then start everything up for the first time. As always, thanks for watching.